Hello everyone, it's Cameron and welcome to another video. Now today we're going to do the first in a new series of something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and now I'm going to do it. It's a new series I'm going to start, and it's called Career / Discography Reviews. I don't know quite what I'll call it yet, but I'll be going over an artist's entire career from their first albums to recent and or last, and let you know what I think of them and show other albums as well throughout and other things related to the artists as well. Now, today my first one, and I wanted to do my first one on an artist who I've heard all the albums of. There's still some artists that I really like that I have heard most but not all, and once I've heard all the of certain artists' catalogues, I'll definitely do them. But the first we're going to do something of an artist where I've heard everything from these artists. And the first one today is going to be a different one. I know you expected me to see the Beatles, but the Beatles will come, don't worry. The artist I'm going to be talking about today is Simon and Garfunkel. Simon and Garfunkel, of course, people remember them as a duo from like the 60s, and they did a lot of great music and a lot of great songs. So I'm going to go over all their albums, talk about their careers, and yeah, everything. So for this video, I know I normally show vinyl, but I'm going to show CDs because they're quite easy to sort of use and sort of whatnot. And there's some Simon and Garfunkel material I'm going to talk about that's not available on vinyl, but which makes sense to talk about in CD. So I do have all the studio albums on vinyl, and of course one of the live albums on vinyl. So I've done a Simon & Garfunkel vinyl collection video if you want to see me go back to that in the channel, so I'll talk about them in detail, but you should see my vinyls of them. So we're going to start with the albums now in their career. So Simon & Garfunkel in the 1950s started as Tom and Jerry, and they released a record called Hey Schoolgirl in 1957 that was almost kind of an Everly Brothers style record. And that was quite a hit, but then their other records didn't do so well, and then they kind of went their separate ways. And then Art went to Columbia University to study architecture, and then him and Paul got back together in 1963. They were friends, and him and Paul kind of started again, and then they signed to Columbia Records in 1963-64. Paul signed and written a lot of songs, and they recorded quite quickly their first album for Columbia Records, which was Wednesday Morning 3 AM, released in October of 1964. This was a kind of folky album. The producer was a guy called Tom Wilson, and Tom Wilson would later become known as somebody who recorded Bob Dylan in an electrified style, and he got Bob Dylan recording in electrical instruments. So yeah. At first, when I first heard this album, I wasn't so keen on it, but it took me a few listens to really like the album, and I do really like it, and I think it's a really really good album. I really like You Can Tell the World, Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream, Bleecker Street, Benedictus, Sounds of Silence, He Was My Brother, Peggy O, Sun Is Burning, Times Are Changing, and the title track as well, which was really good. And yeah, it's a really good album, and the album never did so well, and it wouldn't do well until 1966 when Sounds of Silence came out later on, which we'll touch upon just a minute. But it's a really good album. I know some folk might not like it, some of that other stuff, but I do really like this album. I think it's really really good. And again, it definitely does. It's one that grows on you after a few listens. So great one there, Wednesday Morning 3 AM. And then after the album didn't sell well, and then kind of Simon and Garfunkel went their own ways again. Paul went to live in London, England, and he wrote some songs, and he recorded a solo album titled The Paul Simon Songbook, which I have in both vinyl and CD, but I'll touch upon Simon and Garfunkel's solo careers at a later future video. And then because a lot of radio stations were getting requests to play Sounds of Silence, in particular stations in Gainesville and I think Boston were getting like loads of requests for the song, and college radio stations were beginning to play the song, and Columbia Records I think got wind of this, and Tom Wilson, the producer, without Simon and Garfunkel knowing about this, added electrical guitar instruments and drums to the song, and it turned out from a folk song to a kind of folk rock song. And then Simon & Garfunkel went back into the studio in 1965 to record their second album, which was quite rushed to capitalize the success of the song. And the second album was this, Sounds of Silence, from January of 1966. This is a really good album. I like this one as well. You've got the title track, which is great. You've also got other great ones like Leaves That Are Green, Kathy's Song, Richard Cory, A Most Peculiar Man, April Come She Will, and I Am a Rock, which is another great song. This is another really good album. This kind of carries some of the folk rock elements, and for this album they were producing with a guy called Bob Johnston. Now Bob Johnston went on to, was also producing Bob Dylan at the time, and he would go on to produce Johnny Cash's prison albums at San Quentin at Folsom Prison and some of Johnny's other material. So Bob Johnston's a great producer for this album, and a great producer in general. So yeah, really good album, as I say. This one actually did significantly better in terms of like maybe chart positions and sales. This was a really good album, and it definitely, yeah, great album. Definitely helped Simon & Garfunkel get to the top, and it was almost as if kind of Simon & Garfunkel appeared from nowhere to some people, but they'd actually been going for a long time prior to that, as I said earlier in the video. So kind of like Art Garfunkel said in an interview, as soon as that record goes to #1, it's like a hit, and you're like, I'm living a different life, and that's what it's kind of like for them. And then around about the same time in 1966, Simon & Garfunkel, because of the success of Sounds of Silence, they went in to record the next record, which kind of had to be out at the same time as that one to kind of capitalize their success. And it was this album called Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme, which I've talked about in detail in a separate video. So if you want to see me talk about that in more detail, go back. But for this album, they got a lot of they were free to kind of go and experiment, and they recorded this one from like December 1965 into the August of 1966. So some of these were kind of Sounds of Silence session material. But yeah, still a lot of really good ones on here nonetheless. You've got Scarborough Fair Canticle, Patterns, Homeward Bound, the 59th Street Bridge song Feeling Groovy, The Dangling Conversation, Flowers That Never Bend With the Rain Fall, For Emily Whenever I May Find Her, and 7 O'Clock News Silent Night. 7 O'Clock News Silent Night, that's kind of an interesting track where you've got Simon & Garfunkel singing the Christmas song Silent Night, and you've also got like a news broadcast in the song as well. So it's kind of experimental, but on one ear, in the left speaker, you hear, I think it's the left speaker, you hear Simon & Garfunkel singing Silent Night, the vocal track, and then you hear the music and the news in the other ear, or like Simon & Garfunkel news in one ear, one channel speaker, and then the music in the other. So it's kind of interesting, very experimental, probably one of the earliest experimental tracks on record, I would say. Really great album, probably one of my favourite Simon & Garfunkel albums and Paul Simon albums in general, really. It's one of my favourite albums as well in general. And it was a really great album, and yeah, and as I said, I've talked about this one in a bit more detail, so if you want to see me go over them in a bit more detail, you go back to my channel now. One thing about this now, the original vinyl pressings of these have different track listings. This one had Homeward Bound in it, and this one didn't in the UK, and Homeward Bound was on the US and international editions of this, and not on the US version of Sounds of Silence. But yeah, great album. They're both great albums, those two. And then 1967 came, and there wasn't really much new material from Simon and Garfunkel. The only thing they had out was a single, A Hazy Shade of Winter, and that was it. And then, but the record company got quite concerned that Paul wasn't writing any new material, and Paul was going through a bit of writer's block at this point. And then a director named Mike Nichols asked him if who'd become a fan of Simon and Garfunkel by this point. He asked them if Paul could write some songs for his film that was called The Graduate. Everybody knows what's coming next. As I say, there's The Graduate soundtrack, which consisted of previously released Simon and Garfunkel songs, but there was a new song that they had written for it called Mrs. Robinson. It's a really good song. The film itself, it's a really good film. I like it. Dustin Hoffman's in it. This was 1968, this one, but 67 and 68 rather. But a good film, and the soundtrack's pretty good. There's like incidental music for Dave Grusin, and this, I don't know if it's available in CD elsewhere, but it is available in this Simon & Garfunkel box set where I'm showing my CDs from. But I do have this one on vinyl as well, like with all these albums I'm about to show, or some of them anyway. So yeah, it's not a bad soundtrack, it's quite good, but it isn't. Would you really class it Simon & Garfunkel album? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. But their next album would come in 1968, the same year, with the album Bookends, which is another really great album, their 4th studio album. This is a brilliant album. It's kind of like a concept album, the first half of it, like going through the stages of life, birth, birth, life, and death in a sense. And the album opens up with an instrumental version of Bookends, which is great, and nice piece. And then you've got America, which is one of their best songs. Old Friends and Bookends is a great song. Punky's Dilemma, Mrs. Robinson, of course, Hazy Shade of Winter, which was later a cover hit for the Bangles in the 80s, and then At the Zoo's a great one as well. For this album, they went with a different variety of producers. One song was produced by Bob Johnston, and one song was produced by two songs actually were produced by Bob Johnston, which were Hazy Shade of Winter and At the Zoo. And then one was produced by John Simon, a couple were produced by a guy called John Simon, no relation to Paul, I don't think. And they had a new guy come on producing and engineering called Roy Halley. Now Roy Halley had been their engineer since their first album, but he was now producing Simon and Garfunkel's albums with Simon and Garfunkel at this stage, and yeah, a great album as well. You even get a track in here called Voices of Old People. It's not a track, but it's really where Art Garfunkel went to various nursing homes and care homes across America, like New York and Los Angeles, to record, and he recorded what it says a bunch of elderly people talking. It's an interesting concept, but you know, it's not something you would want to listen to kind of outside the album, but still nonetheless a good album, a really great album, Bookends, from 1968, as I say. And a wee footnote on this, there were two songs that went on this album that had originally been hoping for The Graduate, which were Punky's Dilemma and Overs. But I forget the guy's name, Mike Nichols turned them down, and went to Mrs. Robinson instead, and the full version of Mrs. Robinson's on this, if you can see. So yeah, really great album this one, Bookends, and yeah, a great cover as well. So yeah, hope that was a good one. And then 1969, Simon and Garfunkel were about to make their next album when it was delayed because Art Garfunkel went to film Catch-22 with Mike Nichols and in Mexico, so that kind of put things on hold. And then once Art got back from filming, they went back into the studio to record the next album, which was then released in 1970, and it was this album, Bridge Over Troubled Water. This is probably their best album and my favourite Simon and Garfunkel album, and one of my favourite albums of all time in my opinion. The title track sung brilliantly by Art Garfunkel. You've got Cecilia, which is a great song. So Long Frank, Keep the Customer Satisfied is a great one. The Boxer, which is my favourite Simon and Garfunkel song. Baby Driver, The Only Living Boy in New York, and Song for the Asking is great as well. And you also in this album get a live track called Bye Bye Love, which was recorded live on their 1969 tour. That's a great way. I like the fact and they played a song and then you hear the audience sort of clapping along to it, and I quite like that sound. And there's a really good documentary behind this, if you can find it. It's called The Harmony Game, which is about the making of this album, and it's a really good watch. I really liked it. Yeah, really good album there. Producing and engineering with Roy Halley still in this album, and Roy Halley did a great job. And they did a bit of experiment as well with Cecilia. They did like a bit of percussion loops for this song, and for the Boxer, for the Lie La Lie bit, they had the drummer play the drums in like a hallway to make that kind of boof sound, which is really interesting way of doing it. Yeah, great one. Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, my favourite Simon and Garfunkel album, and my favourite albums of all time. But then after that, but during the sessions of Bridge Over Troubled Water, there was a lot of tension between Paul and Art, and because Art was away filming, Paul began to kind of resent this, and they began to argue quite a bit, and this was something they'd never done. And then after they finished the Bridge Over Troubled Water tour in Forest Hills in New York in 1970, Paul and Art kind of went their separate ways, and they pursued solo careers, which again, as I say, they'll be touched upon in more detail in a later video or on later videos if I decide to review some of these individually. But then in 1972 they reunited for like a one-off benefit at Madison Square Garden, and then in 1972 we got this one, the Greatest Hits. Now I know I wasn't sure about doing Greatest Hits videos, but I thought I'd do them anyway in case, you know, I recommend them to folk. This is a really great Greatest Hits album. You've got the hits on here, but you also got 4 live tracks. You get live versions of For Emily, Whenever I May Find Her, 59th Street Bridge song, Feeling Groovy, a live version of Homeward Bound, and a live version of Kathy's song. The live versions of For Emily and Kathy's song have been released in other compilation albums, but still good to see on here. So yeah, this is a really great album. Again, I have this in vinyl, and pretty much I think loads of people have this in their collections. One of the biggest selling albums of all time as well. Thing about it though, the live versions of 59th Street Bridge song crossfades into Sounds of Silence, and the live version of Homeward Bound crossfades into Bridge Over Troubled Water now. It's a minor thing, I know, but some people don't like it, and I'm sort of in the middle. It's okay. I don't like it as much, but it is what it is, you know. But you do get the version of Bookends without the crossfading from Old Friends, which is good to see. And but yeah, you can see the songs in here, all the kind of big songs in here. There's about 14 of these. Really, really great album. And then, as I say, Simon and Garfunkel kind of went their separate ways, but did occasional like one-off comebacks. Like they did the song "My Little Town," which I have the 45 of, which I forgot to bring up, and that's a really good song. And they also did which that song appeared on the Paul's album and Art's album that they had both had at the same time. Still Crazy After All These Years was Paul's, and Breakaway was Art Garfunkel's. But then in 1981 came the announcement that Simon and Garfunkel were doing a reunion concert in Central Park, and we got this live album, The Concert in Central Park. And I have this in vinyl, and it's a great, great live album. They not only do Simon and Garfunkel songs, but they also do Paul Simon solo songs and one Art Garfunkel solo song. And you also get them covering the Everly Brothers song Wake Up Little Susie, which is great to see them do. Again, I have this on vinyl, on a double vinyl, but this is a single disc. They also made this into a DVD, which I have here, and it's a great concert. Now the DVD has more songs on it than it does on the album, and I think it has a bit more kind of dialogue in the show that's not on the album as well. So yeah, good to have kind of both in a sense, both album and film, DVD, sorry. Yeah, great live album. It's one of my favourite live albums, which was released in 1982, but the concert was in 1981, as it says here. And yeah, it's a great, great live album. I would recommend this one if you can get it. Simon and Garfunkel, The Concert in Central Park. And that was intended to be like a big one-off thing, but then because of that concert, they went and did a reunion tour and went and toured the world, US and Europe. And then it was good that they were going to do another album, which was called Think Too Much. And then the sessions didn't go well between Paul and Art again. And then Garfunkel quit the project, and Paul ended up taking his voice off the album. So it ended up becoming the Paul Simon solo album, Hearts and Bones, rather than a Simon Garfunkel reunion album. But so that was that, really. And that wouldn't be real. But they wouldn't do a reunion until 1993, where they appeared at a benefit concert. And then in the 90s, collections of greatest hits started to come, including this one, the definitive Simon and Garfunkel, released in 1991. If you can, this is one I would definitely recommend if you're just starting out in Simon and Garfunkel and you're not too sure what to get. This would be a good CD to start from, I think. You got all the big hits in here, but as well as this was kind of put together by Art Garfunkel. He kind of sat down and sort of put together the Simon and Garfunkel songs that he liked and that he really, and yeah, and he picked some really great ones in my opinion. It's got a nice cover with Paul and Art in the studio with an acoustic guitar there. I've always liked that picture. It's a nice picture. And there's the back, the songs, as I say. If you can get this CD, it's quite cheap. I have it on vinyl as well, but it's not that easy to get because it was at a time when CD was kind of becoming the dominant format, and vinyl was just kind of, well, few people. I wouldn't say nobody bought vinyl then, but few people did back then. So CD is probably your best call to get it. But this is a great, great album, a great CD. I'd recommend this one if you can. So yes, in 1993 they did like a reunion benefit concert in like New York, and then in 1997 we got this set, which is Old Friends, a 3-disc set which contains unreleased demo, which contains some previously released songs, but it has like unreleased versions of songs and unreleased live songs as well. You've got a demo of Bleecker Street on here. And you've also got an unreleased song that was recorded during the Sounds of Silence sessions in 1965 called Blues Run the Game, which is a really good song. And you've also got live recordings of A Poem on the Underground Wall, Blessed Angie, and A Church is Burning. A Church is Burning was a Paul Simon solo song that I think he did for the Paul Simon songbook. And there was a song here called Red Rubber Ball, which Paul ended up giving to a group. I can't mind their name. Why don't I give it to somebody? You've got Comfort and Joy and Star Carol, which were like Christmas songs that Paul and Art did for some reason but never released. You've got live recordings of Overs, A Most Peculiar Man and Bye Bye Love, and Hey Schoolgirl Black Slacks with That Silver Haired Daddy of Mine, which was one that the Everly Brothers sang, or Gene Autry did it originally. There's other stuff in here, like a one called Fulizo. I don't know how you say it, but that was a leftover from the Bridge Over Troubled Water sessions. This would be good for like fan collectors for some of the unreleased material, and yeah, it's not a bad set, I think. It's a really good one to get hold of if you can. Then in 1999 we got another compilation, and this is, if you're a big Simon and Garfunkel fan, or if you want to start, this would probably be a good one as well. Tales of New York, the very best of Simon and Garfunkel. This has a lot of the release stuff, but also like some of the hits, but also album tracks as well, which is really interesting. You can pause it and have a look if you can see for yourself. It's released in 1999, but it's a really good double CD of Simon and Garfunkel because it's got a lot of rare album tracks and a lot of songs that don't appear anywhere outside the albums. So this is a really, really good one, I would say, to get your hands on. There's great choices in here like Peggy O, Sun Is Burning, Benedictus, April Comes She Will, Flowers Never Bend When the Rain Fall, Dangling Conversation. The studio version for Emily Whenever I May Find Her makes an appearance on here, which is great to see. You've also got yeah, you got a lot on here, which is good to own. And My Little Town as well, from like the reunion single in 1975. So yeah, this is one I would recommend you get if you can find it. And then in 2002 we get this one, a live album, Live from New York City 1967. This was released in 2002. This is a live album taken from the Lincoln Center from Harmonic Hall in January 1967. So yeah, it's a really good live album, I would say. It's just Paul and Art and the acoustic guitar, and it's a really nice, it makes a nice kind of atmospheric listen to the show in a way. It's a really nice atmospheric concert to be at in a way, because it's just Paul and Art and the acoustic guitar in a hall, and it's a really nice live album, really good recording as well. You get like the performances from like their first 3 albums, but there was a song on here that Paul had almost finished at the time, which was called You Don't Know Where Your Interest Lies, which was a B-side song for one of their songs. I can't mind which one it was, but I think it would later become a B-side some, and it's on like some of the sets I've just shown you. And it was released on a CD bonus track of Bookends. But some of the tracks had previously appeared on the Old Friends set, but it's kind of good to have because this is the full show, the complete show from that concert, but it doesn't have Red Rubber Ball in it, which is unfortunate, but still nonetheless a great show and a great live album. So yeah, definitely, if you're looking for Simon & Garfunkel live material, definitely get this one. Then 2003, the announcement came that Simon and Garfunkel were going to be doing a reunion tour in the US and Europe, around about the world, and then they recorded and filmed some shows, and this was the album we got, which was released in 2004. It's called Old Friends Live on Stage. This is a really pretty good live album, although their voices by this point are kind of starting to age a bit. This is still a good live album. Double CD, and there's the songs. They do their catalogue as well, but they also do songs, the Tom and Jerry Hey Schoolgirl, but during the show they also get the Everly Brothers to join them on Bye Bye Love as well, which is great to see because I'm a big Everly Brothers fan too. And the Everly Brothers were big influences on Simon and Garfunkel, so it's great to see the Everly Brothers join Paul and Art for that song Bye Bye Love. But the Everly Brothers also got their own kind of set during the shows as well, which is not on here on the album, but still good to see. And you also get a bonus studio track on here called Citizen of the Planet. That was a song that Paul had written during the 80s, but then he finished it in 2004. It was with Art Garfunkel, and it ended up going on this album, which is really nice song. Citizen of the Planet. It's really nice nice song. There's the back of the songs. And several of the shows were recorded at Madison Square Garden and Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and they did a DVD as well called Old Friends Live on Stage. This, I'll be honest, has a bit more songs on it. It's a really good concert, a really good watch, I'd say. This has more songs in it than it does on the CD. On the CD you've got the Everly Brothers set, which has Wake Up Little Susie and All I Have to Do Is Dream. as well as them singing Bye Bye Love with Simon and Garfunkel. But you also have Cecilia's on the live album. 59th Street Bridge song Feeling Groovy, which is not on the CD. Neither is Keep the Customer Satisfied, which is good to see on here. And but yeah, it's a good live album, good live performances. Their voices are on okay form, not bad. And then 2003, remember at the time of that reunion tour, we got another compilation, The Essential Simon and Garfunkel. This is probably another good one to start with. If you either of those three, if you want to get either the ones I've just shown you, that's fine. But this is another great one to start with, I'd say. It's a 2 CD set, and it has their songs, some live versions that appeared on some of the live albums, and it has My Little Town as well. So this will probably be a good one because it's still got quite a lot in here and a lot to cover, and it covers all there. And pretty much you get every song, almost every song of Bridge Over Troubled Water in this 2 CD set, bar Keep the but except for Why Don't You Write Me. So pretty much get everything from Bridge except for that one. So yeah, a good CD to own nonetheless. There's also another Simon and Garfunkel compilation I have on vinyl called the Simon and Garfunkel Collection, 17 of their all-time greatest recordings. I had that on CD ages ago, and I don't know what I've done with it or what's happened with it, but I don't know where it is now, but it should be about somewhere in the house. If not, I'll probably try and find a replacement of it. And then 2008 or 2009 is the most recent Simon and Garfunkel release. There was a compilation called America, the Simon and Garfunkel Collection. That's a short one, that's got like 12 songs, so maybe that one I wouldn't recommend. But then we got another live album, Live 1969. This was a live album with a selection of songs from their 1969 tour, October, like their late autumn, October to November of 1969. These live recordings are from. You pretty much get everything that they had to that point, as well as the first time live performances of some of the songs from Bridge Over Troubled Water. So this is a good live album. If you can find this live album, definitely recommend this live album. It's probably one of my favourite live albums as well. And you even get to hear Simon and Garfunkel say, "This is a new song, and we've just made a new record. It'll be out soon," or stuff like that. And this is a new. And some of the songs are just Simon and Garfunkel on their own with acoustic guitar, but some they get their backing band that they had been recording with on the album. So that's great to see as well. Good to see them. They're kind of mixing the album a bit about, and yeah, really good live album. One that I would recommend if you can find it. Live 19. It originally came out as a Starbucks exclusive to Starbucks, but then it came out as a standalone release, and it was available in one of the re-releases of Bridge Over Troubled Water. So good to see that one there. And that's kind of it for the Simon and Garfunkel discography career reviews. I mean, the last sort of live concert they did was at the New Orleans and Jazz Heritage Festival in 2010. And even though Paul Simon did say he would probably reunite with Art, that was never the case. And then in recent interviews he said that no, he won't reunite with Art again because they don't talk, which is quite sad to see, but you know, it's the way things go, I guess. But there we are, that's my Simon and Garfunkel career discography review. I hope you liked the video, and sort of any closing afterthought and remark? Well, I think it's safe to say that pretty much everything they recorded was great. There was never a bad record or a bad song in my eye in their group kind of albums, and when they were together was never a bad song in my opinion. Not a bad record in my opinion, I think. And I think had they kind of stayed together for a bit longer, I think, yeah, I'm sure they would have done some great stuff, but there could have been a point in their career where it maybe wouldn't have been as good as what came before, but I think it still would have been great, I think, to see Simon and Garfunkel do more after Bridge. But yeah, but I'm still pleased with what we got in the end, and we have what we got, and that's a great thing. And both Paul and Art are still doing like solo stuff, which is good to see, and it's good to see it. They're both in their 80s and they're both getting on, but it's still good to see them both do out there and do kind of music. So that's it for the first of my new series called Discography. I know it's a bit of a long video, and I know I do talk on for too long, but if you've got through this, well done, because I know I do talk on for too long, but I kind of hope to do more of these as we go along. So next will probably be the Beatles, and I'm hoping to do ones like Springsteen and Tom Petty, definitely Tom Petty and Bruce Springsteen I would like to do, and REO Speedwagon and other artists. Yeah, do all my favourites maybe, but anyways, hope you liked this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video.